Turns out he's a major cinephile.
They don't watch enough movies. It's a very simple formula.
And here we go. It is time for another episode of Nick Nack Goes to the Movies. Really, the only movie review and discussion podcast you ever want or need, really. Holy guacamole and cheese Louise, it has been a minute since I made one of these. I have to admit. I fully intended to make an episode solely on Guardians of the Galaxy 3. I think it deserves that at the very least, being the end cap of easily one of the most consistent franchises within the MCU. But when I get backlogged, just life events and a ton of movies come out overall, I had to combine the latest few just to get caught up. So I can give you all of the, I'd say new, but they don't really feel new right now, the things that had at one point come out in theaters as I continue to go to these movies at Marcus Theaters. What a Cinema. Greg Marcus hit me up. Being your commercials, I think I'd be a real asset. Anyway, what's in this double, I guess triple feature entry now? Well, it should be obvious first off, even though I haven't touched on this series a ton on this podcast yet. It's the 11th entry of the Fast and Furious series, Fast X. Never forget there's one more canonical entry with the spin-off with Jason Statham and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. And to go with our first Marvel movie, that's MCU, this one is going to be a non-MCU Marvel movie following the critical and surprising mass success of the Sony Spider-Man movie in the modern enough era. Not Peter Parker as leading man played by either Tobey Maguire or Andrew Garfield, but finally putting the movie spotlight on Miles Morales. The success that came from the first one, they're going to make a second one, and guess what? They're going to make a third. But we're talking about the second one right now, the Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, which is the sequel. So, a couple of big budget blockbusters, spring movies. I guess we're peaking in the summer, obviously, now. I'll try to be more consistent. Things just peak up sometimes. But we got some big name franchises in short. And here we are to talk on all three. So, if you're new to the show, welcome, howdy, hey, take a seat. You know, we'll talk about the actors in these first, and then we'll get into the meat of each of these movies. So, we have to start with Guardians, obviously, because even going into this, I didn't think I had to compare and contrast these three, and one, you really can't. But I knew this was going to be special. And if I have to compare them, which, like I said, we've kind of found ourselves this way, if it's a clash of movies, of cinema, this makes me feel like this is going to be the best one. Just from, I don't even know if you had to look at the trailers. You just read the three, I think you would have said, yeah, this is probably going to be the best. Maybe you could have made the argument for Spider-Verse, feeling like you have there more something unique to the superhero genre. I don't think anyone would have said Fast X would be their front runner of these three. So obviously, the main cast, the main core of these movies, they're all back. Chris Pratt, Bradley Cooper, Vin Diesel. Look at him making in this episode twice. Dave Bautista, Karen Gillan, Zoe Salonda. The character swap of a younger version of her who hasn't been through all this stuff, Gamora, you know. We'll get to some of the things that you hopefully are aware of if you haven't seen since like the second Guardians. I don't know who has watched these movies that way, but just in case, we'll get there. The new staples are also back with James Gunn's brother Sean Gunn, who's in all his movies, and Pom Klementif. But now that the obvious is out of the way, I did love to see a bit more of, I mean, it's his movie after all. It's another Sylvester Stallone flick, Guardians 3. Sadly, Smallville legend Michael Rosenbaum did not get to do much, and Miley Cyrus was recast from this last one that she was in, just like the post-credit scene. The Reavers group did not do as much as we initially thought from the even brief part we saw of them in the second volume of these, but at least they existed. And the new major casts fit right in. Will Poulter, who may have been a questionable cast at first, seems like a home run now as a younger, more naive Adam Warlock. And while we have discussed the ever-growing we're always talking about this, or I'm always talking about this. I think that everyone is. It's a conversation point. The MCU has a villain problem. You now have Chakudi Iwuji throwing his hat in the mix as the High Evolutionary, which we'll get into how successful this villain is or isn't in this movie. Got to give you a little will he, won't he? Got to keep you guessing. And while we did not have a ton of sci-fi superstar Nathan Fillion, there is more of him in this movie over his voice role of an animated alien thing in the first one. Just seeing the space rogue face and all, he actually has some good moments here too. You gotta love it. I know I do. TBD if his TDK character will come back in any future Suicide Squad projects. I know there was some news out where maybe 3's not even in the works right now. But hey, his character is technically alive at the end of the last one, which is more than a lot of people can say in that movie. Also, for sure, just enjoy the fact that James Gunn is casting his other usual suspects like Jennifer Holland and Michael Rooker. The pipeline of people in this franchise and then the Peacemaker Suicide Squad group, it's a fun Google search if you have some time. And I do love Michael Rooker in these movies. So it's worth noting that, and I kind of touched on this before, this movie does have some info that might have been nice to know, like the setup for the holiday special on Disney Plus. And look, you could say as far back as some of those Avengers movies. And I'll put it out there. I really like this holiday Guardians of the Galaxy special. And it has the likes of Kevin Bacon. But you might be a bit confused as to why our Guardians are where they are and what the setup is if you only had seen, from Guardians to Avengers Infinity War Endgame. And you might be missing even some stuff if you didn't see not the strongest MCU entry, no one would say it was, Thor 4. Because you might wonder, is Chris Hemsworth in Guardians of the Galaxy 3? And if you had seen Thor 4, you would know, no, he is not. But before we go into all that, the soundtrack. With these movies, you have to talk about it. I don't know if I love the sum of its parts over the first two soundtracks, the awesome mixes. We'll start to get to some newer, comparatively rock or some more modern songs as we go through this franchise. I'm an oldies man. And we got some Heart, some Springsteen, and I think the really good song by Rainbow, Since You've Been Gone, that steals the show overall. That has to be the new Hooked on a Feeling or Come and Get Your Love. All of these are really good. Sad we never got Space Oddity in any of these. I think that was one that people were always asking James is going to do, and he just didn't want to do it, probably because people were asking, it sounded like. Not as strong overall for the soundtrack. Maybe I just don't care as much for the Beastie Boys music, or as much as I do love Florence and the Machine, to me, it doesn't fit the Guardians' usual musical vibes. I'm sure you could have got a similar sounding song. I get it, they're aging him up through his music and stuff through the decades, but I don't know. I feel like there was a bit of a jump between 2 and 3 that was not there in 1 and 2. And you could say, in universe, that makes sense, because the awesome mix for Volume 2 was just another cassette from the exact same time period as the first set of songs was. So, I don't know. Just had to get into it briefly. Have to go on to the story and such, I guess. Initially, these movies have given Peter Quill the leading role, and the stories were still told of the others, but not as much. This movie takes an interesting and unique way of telling a third and closing chunk of the trilogy. It clearly feels like the trilogy is done, even though some characters may pop up. But it gives us a ton of backstory and weaves in it all into the present of one unlikely raccoon. I'm not sure who I needed to learn more about overall. Groot would have always been interesting. Just an interesting talking tree character. You don't see them much except for in Lord of the Rings. Gamora, I feel like, was sort of off the table. I think I wanted to have probably a more satisfying story with Drax, But that would have involved more of a resolution with him and Thanos. We're past that. Never saw it. Bummer, but nothing could be done. And that's what happens when you got all these movies in different parallel universes and the same universes and different directors. And it's really hard to land every story with every single interwoven story going on, especially with those last two Avengers. But Rocket is an interesting one to focus on. Not a bad one, just don't know who I would have said is the most important to find out more. And it's an interesting one. And a good one. And it's more interesting than expected. But it really is, I think, to more of a surprise, an emotional story. And maybe the trailers touched on that, but you never really know what it's going to look like as a final product. One of the best, I think, emotionally the MCU has ever delivered. Early Iron Man and Captain America, they all had moments, consistently, though, outside of the Avengers, some of those, I don't know if you can count those, they're in another class. The Guardians movies have all had probably the most emotional resonance and just like hits as you watch those movies. And seeing how Rocket was made so long ago, a question, we all had. And it's two cute and one weird half spider looking thing. You know me, not my vibe. But there's this animal foursome of friendship. And I don't know if it's something I know I needed. I don't think anyone would have said that, but it was good. Like, there are a bunch of these just naive, curious animal friends, and look, Rocket was somehow gifted with more intelligence than a lot of other people, seemingly. But when you think of these cute animal friends, like one of them was named Teefs for having big walrus teeth. That whole quote of, I think we all have big teeth, but mine might be the most pronounced, so I guess I'll be Teefs. What a moment. What a great moment. Now, sadly, we can't have nice things. As we find out, they all got killed as Rocket was trying to make it out of there with all of them, in theory, but the rest of them died. Where did those all take place, This is kind of what makes our villain, how we are introduced as this guy's, evil plan. I don't know, evil, but how he goes about it's pretty evil. Is trying to make a perfect race, which, there's got to be some implications of history in there somewhere, right? But Chakotay Iwuji is the high evolutionary. And this, I don't know the comic book history. I don't know nothing. But what I do know is the one we saw in the MCU is just evil. The reason of evil is just there. Look, it's like Amazing Spider-Man with the guy just want to make everyone a lizard. This guy's trying to do something slightly different. Different direction with the assignment. Now, while that happens throughout, we're seeing some of the flashbacks of kind of how this came to be and how it relates to our boy Rocket. This happens parallel to the present. And it's worth noting that the Sovereign storyline, which was the gold-skinned group of people in the second movie, feels like a lifetime ago with all that's happened in the MCU and the history. But the chickens have finally come home to roost as Adam Warlock finally hatches. Gosh, we love a little fun with words. Albeit early from his cocoon to come and take revenge on the Guardians for the slight they had put on his people. He comes to the new HQ, which, like I said, you only really know about this if you'd seen the holiday special, which they do some good work. Disney Plus needs holiday, the Halloween, the Christmas one, they do some good holiday specials. But he wrecks the place up, and the main cast of characters, they gotta go. But all this puts Rocket in critical condition. And man, did all those trailers make us think they were going to kill off at least him, maybe Quill. They don't, spoiler alert, but it was close. But they did send us on a fun quest to deal with the Sovereign, save Rocket because of him being proprietary technology, and eventually dealing with, full circle story, the High Evolutionary, this new fella that seems a little amiss. And of course, more important, we have to see Sylvester Stallone star the Expendables franchise again. Can't wait. Shocked that there was a fourth one already. That trailer has been nowhere unless you're actively searching it out. But it's there. And like his crew, sadly minus Miley Cyrus. But there is a new fun member with Paz Gamora. With, no memory of the Guardians, just that Avengers Endgame sort of memory. That's who she hangs with and where she hangs her hat. not that she isn't, of course, with the OG Guardians almost immediately, while the tangent to the big space company didn't add a ton for me, some set piece moments did not do all that maybe the other two did. I did love to see live action Nathan Fillion, and like he got some more time after his first brief alien role in the prison, and the second movie he had his role cut, and it was going to be at a post-credit something or another. But he had some good humor about, like, I got one of those guys on my crew that was pretty good recurring joke. Some darker semi-villain role moments. Just happy he can stretch his legs more, his actual legs. He doesn't always get a ton of time to shine in recent James Gunn superhero movies. Now does he? So it's nice to see a little bit of something for Nathan Fillion there. And I guess they end up from here, they go to Counter-Earth, which is just Earth, but a bunch of like animal people. Like there's rabbit dudes, and there's, I don't know, a lot of animal people. I think things really slow down a bit. But once it all becomes clear that so much of this was set up just showing how many races were just pawns and failed experiments, flaws considered by the high evolutionary to make his people. I mean, even the Sovereign were that, apparently. I mean, when you think of, how many races in the MCU did make, they almost are all just Guardians people, races that we've just met in that franchise. It would have been cool if they would have also said, he also made, I don't know, someone in the Asgard world. I like I said, comics, I don't know. I'm just saying, like, it would have been fun to have a connection somewhere outside of just Guardians for him to be. But it's a lot easier to connect your own universe without having to branch into what other directors are doing. But look, at the end of the day, these are all considered to high evolutionary expendable sentient beings that, like, we just see them. They're all killed off without mercy. That's sort of his whole vibe. It does take a while for Rocket to wake up and to join the group and for everyone to actually be teamed up as one. But when they do, not only do we get some amazing action scenes, but just the casting and role of Will Poulter's Adam Warlock continues to shine. His adolescent, strong guy vibe, no one knew going into it what it would look like, but it worked well. He is imposing, but only up until you realize how empty-headed he is. That and the actor's comedic timing just works, like, really, really well. Now, if there's one thing this movie has, it has a balance of fun and, like, really heavy-hitting emotional stakes. So many emotional moments. It strikes you to your core. I mean, heck, they did the whole Harry Potter Death Purgatory scene, but even sadder and better. Harry didn't want to die. Rocket kinda did. But thankfully he gets brought back to life to live on for his dead animal friends. All for, Lila, Teefs, and even though I didn't like the whole Spider Bunny thing, Floor. The fight with everyone was actually pretty brutal in, like, the best possible way. Not cutting anyone in half lengthwise, but there was fluid going everywhere. And some brutal either, like, killings or maimings of, like, nailing guys with daggers to walls and stuff. And sometimes you can get away with, like, robots and creatures. You can see more, like, air quotes, blood and gore. But, like, this isn't to the level of a hallway Netflix MCU scene. NMCU. Netflix, Marvel, Cinematic Universe, and MCU. We'll go with that. I think I said that back when I did all those. But it's a lot closer to that over a lot of things we've seen of late in the MCU actual. And this scene was, of course, important, but while we didn't get that Drax closure I feel like a lot of people would have wanted in Endgame or Infinity War, seeing him be the one to talk to, entertain, and save all of the newly created children, that was just some big dad energy. And we were once again maybe not expecting, but man, did it help with his character arc and growth. He was introduced as a destroyer, but he was a dad first, and he ended his arc just being a good dad to a bunch of orphan kids. Also, seeing the backstory of the high evolutionaries' face being all messed up and part of Rocket's initial retribution to what it looks like under like the fake cover-up skin after they kick his ass. That was a satisfying moment. Now, they surprisingly let him live, but at least they knocked him down a few pegs. MCU has of late been trying to not kill off all its villains immediately, which used to be a big problem in the first few phases of this stuff. But crazily enough, they save all the animals and people, and Quill almost dies. I was trying to remember, couldn't figure it out, couldn't remember, but I think he dies going after his music player, his Zune. Like, that felt super out of left field. Like, I felt like they did it. I don't know. That was a little interesting that that's where they went. I know there was a reason, but at least it did lead to Quill being saved after almost dying like Yondu in the cold recesses of space, not having his whole, like, celestial being god powers. And he's actually saved by now good guy Adam Warlock. Also, yeah, it was small, but at least we got a small Michael Rooker moment to help Sean Gunn kind of have the whole whistling pointy thing, because he had it in the beginning. He wasn't good at it. He had the Guardians 2, wasn't good at it. But it was nice that he had his control moment, and he had a little flashback to Yondu to kind of give him that kind of guiding light. Love that actor, Michael Rooker, from these movies and his redemption arc in Walking Dead, the early seasons. Still haven't finished Walking Dead. That's probably an episode that's ages, feels like, since I did the first half of going through those seasons. We'll get there, but that's going to be a long one. The end kind of sends everyone off on their own new path. It's like graduating college. Everyone goes in their own separate directions to do whatever they do. Not all as exciting as others, but there is for sure something cool about Peter finally going home to Earth to see his grandpa and the new Guardians. They exist too. Also cool. Those are probably the top two. Groot and Rocket are now the only original members of the team. Kraglin's back now, being able to seemingly control the fin and the little whistle. Whistle. I can't whistle. Cosmo, the Russian talking dog, who did add some fun parts to the movie overall. Didn't really talk on that character a lot. All good. It's just, it was kind of in the beginning and the end, and that was kind of it for the most part. And a reformed Adam Warlock joins the team too. So there is like a new family in the satisfying collection of the Guardians movies. It's this new group that's thrown together and will go do some good deeds and stuff, right? Has to be one of the most complete franchises of the MCU. But from this adoptive MCU family, we're going to transition to another one. You knew I used family for a reason. And this one also has Vin Diesel, just with more coronas and somehow less realism. This Fast franchise is loaded with characters portrayed by big-name actors. After currently 11 entries, not surprising. Especially when they keep bringing people back from the dead. I'd say the usual people are in this, but pretty much outside of like Vin Diesel as Dom Toretto, I'll probably never really know the character name of these actors. And I've seen these movies. Maybe I'm not like a diehard as others, but I watch these movies and say, oh, look, it's Ludacris driving cars or submarines and such. That's sort of how I think about it. But yeah, for a recap, everyone's pretty much back. It feels like everyone. They kill off a few people, but, they never really stay dead. Michelle Rodriguez, who we just talked about in one of our last episodes about the lovely underrated D&D movie. Tyrese Gibson, Nathalie Emmanuel, of course, from Game of Thrones, who's now been in 4 of these, I guess. Sung Kang as Han, one of the many people who come back from the dead in this franchise. I feel like those are the big name people who have the most screen time. But a lot of these people who are littered in this franchise get some time to shine at least. Jordana Brewster, who I think I only know her from this series. I feel like I always forget between her and Rodriguez which one's the sister and which one's the wife of Dom. It's so hard to remember unless you literally watch a movie and see him kissing the one and not kissing the other one. But I really don't know with this franchise. Remember when Luke Evans was in Fast and Furious as a franchise? Well, I do. I enjoyed him as the big bad, but people sort of forgot about him in these in lieu of his movie brother played by another Expendables star and star of The Meg. Other movies, I'm sure, but Jason Statham. But all things aside, I really do like him. He has done some stellar work with the Guy Ritchie movies like Snatch and Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. We don't talk about Revolver here. It's a little weird. And of course, Italian Job, the movie that got him seen by most of us and probably got him into this other car franchise. And according to my dad, of course, the one scene in the beginning of Homefront. I bet you don't remember that one. Yeah, I don't either. Something with drug dealers, I think. But just that one scene my dad can't help but think about every so often. But yeah, this is really just JS, Jason Statham, for, you squares who don't know what JS is. Appreciation post. We love him on this podcast. He's not super in this movie, more like a small cameo, like it feels like Brie Larson, Scott Eastwood. Surprisingly, Helen Mirren came back. That one is probably the craziest of all these. How did they get her in this franchise after all? Still waiting for them to bring back Cardi B after the last entry. They said she was going to be here. They lied. She wasn't. I assumed she was part of the family, Coronas and all, but apparently not the case. I know we just met John Cena as far as this franchise is concerned, and while he may not be the longest tenured one, he sure is a fun addition. Maybe it's blending his Peacemaker character a bit. Like, he was a no-nonsense character in the last movie, and he has a ton more fun now that he too is part of the family. I think Charlize Theron has been like 3 of these now, 2 as the main villain, like clearly. And they've redeemed villains before, but not like this. Not like this. Cypher, this tech woman who also just kills people sometimes. I do wonder if they're ever gonna forgive her and let her join this group. I doubt it. I feel like some people can't, but you never really know. This movie does unintentionally sometimes subvert expectations, and I like it, but I don't want to give this franchise too much credit for that. It may be a known thing, but wow, has Alan Ritchson grown as an actor that I'm all about. Sure, he's played the dumb jock well enough in Blue Mountain State, but, from his Hunger Games time to his superhero work, I'm happy to see him getting more time to shine. That and all his scenes from Reacher on TikTok. Every time I see something, it makes me want to check that out, and I don't even think it's a long investment. I just haven't gone around to it. The problem, too many things to watch, not enough time. But for sure, it was fun seeing him take on another franchise, even in a supporting role. Now, there's a ton of villains in this series who have come and gone. Most have died, somehow Cypher's still kicking. Not all of them have died, but a lot of them have. And while Joaquim de Almeida may not be the most memorable of these villains, I feel like a lot of memorable fun things happened in Fast 5. Sometimes I think that and 4 get super mixed up with one another. This actor has had some great stints in TV shows overall, and bring him back, even for a flashback thing that happened in the past, like, you guys know, going back to the past for the sake of the future of stories, it doesn't always work for me, but in this franchise, it's fun. There's no clear trajectory for this franchise after the last one. But after this movie, there's an idea of revenge tour. But to the new villain of the movie and potentially the future of the franchise, even though the future might be like one more movie, maybe 2, Vin Diesel keeps changing his mind. Jason Momoa. I don't think there were too many ideas or expectations for him in this, either overall or by the fits he had on in the trailers and such. But as we get into this episode and talk more on this topic, there are so many good vibes around his casting character, and you're going to hear a lot of Jason Momoa stuff as we talk about Fast X. And look, plot is sort of secondary to Fast and Furious movies. There is one that exists. Can I tell you what's happened in every entry and what the story is? No. Not really, no. They have been doing all sorts of things with car races and heists. It's something about going to some submarines or spy satellites, and of course they can't stop there. They're even in space. I can't necessarily tell you the plot of every movie or how we got here, but Dominic Toretto continues to steal things, grow his surrogate family, lose some members along the way, but they normally come back from the dead and pop up again. Not as zombies, though this franchise has yet to dabble with that, even with the rumor of a Jurassic Park crossover. That synergy would be wrong with that one if Universal Pictures goes that way. But assuming things don't get Jurassic up in here, instead this franchise finds a way to go back to the past and try to find a second gear to take this franchise to overdrive and, drive off into the sunset as it eventually finds a finish line from a race that started way back in 2001. And man, am I feeling good about all them car words. Not a car guy, but I think I took that into overdrive, or I think I ran out of car words. So, the first three of these movies kind of stand out on their own, with the OG2 and whatever your opinion on Tokyo Drift is. Once we get to Fast 6, I start to combine things where the British are coming with Jason Statham, Owens, a lot of Charlize Theron, and eventually to where we are with John Cena, and eventually now to Jason Momoa. 4 and 5 just really blend together, with the only major difference, a defining thing, I guess, to break them apart is that the second one, that's the first one where we meet The Rock, right? So the fourth one happens, and then The Rock has to go be the man of the law. I think that's kind of what happens. But 5 is the one that we're transported back to, watching this movie with Hernan Reyes, the big bad there, having a son that we've never met before, played by our shining beacon of a hero in Aquaman, Jason Momoa. We'll see if your opinion changes on that after whatever The Flash was with his character briefly, or whatever Aquaman 2 be. But for now, shining superstar in that franchise. I have talked about this before of not loving throwing lore that previously did not exist into a franchise retroactively. My favorite goofy slasher franchises are both guilty of this. Also, what the heck is going on with Friday the 13th? I know the whole game is, won't be sold anymore. Maybe it's updated. I just got to know, can I play this game in 3 years from now, or is it never going to work again, even though I have a physical copy? I have so many questions. Been trying to figure it out. We'll get there eventually. Because you have to log in. I did try, we got all the things. I have all the Jasons now. I have everything unlocked. Love that. I just want to be able to run around every so often, kill a bunch of counselors in my whatever Jason outfit, and just play bots. That's all I want to do. Is that too much to ask? I don't know. Sorry, this is coming up again, and it makes me wonder. I would be pissed if I couldn't play this game. It's not a great game, but it's fun, and it's good for me. It's good for me. So, tangent over, I hope. But to that premise of shoving previously unexisted lore in, it works a little better here, and honestly, I think it works actually pretty good, because they've filmed some scenes, and there's more realized moments that shows another side of the story. It felt better because of these things. And it was at least more believable, for sure, compared to giving Dom another sibling in the 10th entry. That's the inverse of this, of putting things that never existed before. That pissed me off, I think, to start. Maybe I've softened. I haven't seen whatever the 9th movie is called. I haven't seen it since the first time I saw it in theaters, so maybe it's better. I do like the Michael Rooker's also in that. He also was supposed to be in this 10th one, was not. Maybe he'll be back in the 11th, especially with who actually is maybe or maybe not dead at the end of this one. So, the last movie ended happily enough, but once again, the crew is off on another globe-trotting adventure to, I guess, this time just save the world. They're either doing that or stealing stuff, sometimes stealing stuff to save the world. The whole agency group really changes things up a bit. Of a government group who, they're not part of the Dom family. Do you like Domily? TBD if I'll stick with that. But they partner up with the agency group. That was the whole Kurt Russell thing, among others. And now I guess Alan Rich is in charge of it. We haven't seen Kurt Russell in a bit. But Dom is doing the domestic life. So he can't pop around Italy and do something with another microchip. But I guess it's all a trick, which makes way more sense with the reveal at the end of the movie, with how this should have been easy to tell who the bad people were. It happens with the Scream movies as you watch them, or any horror movie with an unknown killer. The things make sense the second time, and it's actually interesting that you didn't think it made more sense because of how obvious it feels like it could have been. So this started as a classic Fast and Furious heist with cars, some computers or chip or something. And eventually it's a frame job and a race against the clock to stop a big ass metal like ball bomb rolling around Italy that's on fire. I'm in disbelief that a bomb on fire rolling around somewhere, bouncing around buildings and roads and everything, never goes off. I'm shook and weak and dead all at the same time. While Dom goes to save the family, he leaves his very real family after seemingly series regular villain tells them about this whole plot. All of this pales in comparison to just how much fun Jason Momoa is here. He is hamming it up big, like in a way that you could throw 90s Batman villains to shame with what he's doing here. He is the reason to watch this movie. You can like the cars and some of the actors, no clue who they are playing, but the actors. But he is the reason here. From goofing around 1 second to menacing and playing with dead bodies the next, all with fire flamboyant fits. I can't explain how much he brings to put a little spice. It brings a little seasoning to a somewhat repetitive franchise. It's not bad. You do the same thing with Expendables, Rambo, a ton of other franchises that mostly give you more of the same. You know where you're getting with these Fast and Furious movies, but it's nice to mix it up a little bit. Also, I totally forgot. Glenn Powell was apparently in the third Expendables. I didn't even remember that, but apparently he is. So we'll have to rewatch that way more now after the whole Top Gun Maverick and then the Scream Queens and everything else that Glenn Powell seemingly is in. While the introduction was late and a bit much last movie to John Cena's character, I'm really happy with what he's become. He's less dark like his last movie. Like, he was too serious in the last movie, especially with what the franchise is. But he is a bit more inspired by his Peacemaker character, especially from the HBO Max show, not just the movie. And he gets a good chunk of time to shine, either beating up guys throughout the Toretto house, through ceilings and walls and floors, and it gets his nephew safely to his new hideout. So it's all good. But I for sure forgot about the big spy satellite in this franchise. As the way to track seemingly everybody and everything, those plot points are just not why we're here. They do have a vintage with having just a race to have a race with the villain, but like it doesn't really matter in the end kind of thing. With just like the dancing girls and Miami. It's very vintage Fast and Furious, which isn't necessarily great. Like I said, these movies are all over the place. It's okay. They're not great. We don't have to think they're great. They can be fun and not great. Sharknado existed, so never forget. Imagine if they did a Fast Furious Sharknado. I would watch the heck out of that. If someone hasn't pitched that, pitch it. I'll help you in the writer's room for that. I'm sure my script writing minor that I could help write the Fast and Furious Sharknado movie. I'm sure I can't think of a title right now, but give me some time. I'll come up with a good one. But other than have, like a Cypher reluctant team up with, I think it's Letty is right. Letty's Michelle Rodriguez's character. Like that happens, and then the shocking reveal for Gal Gadot to still be alive, like Han, who you hope they reunite for the next one, because like I thought there was some romance there, and like he's been dead but not dead for a while. She's been dead for even longer but not dead. What the heck? What a tortured romantic life they live. But like all those moments, they're just brief things that happen before it all just boils down to a big driving race moment of having Dom and John Cena race against Momoa, try to stop a lot of other cars to save their son nephew, even though he has the kid in his car the first time. Like, as a Lil B, I think, like Lil Brian, I think that's the whole thing. It's like when they named that Harry Potter's kid, like, I don't remember, but it's like the joke about naming just fan fiction character names. I kind of forgot what the rest of the Domily, it's working, Dominic Toretto family, like what they do, no clue what they're doing. Like they're hanging out Pete Davidson for a smidge, But really the big end points is John Cena having a car with, in essence, cannons on both sides. Cool to see. But gosh darn, of course, it immediately breaks after like 2 or 3 fires. And that's not enough to stop every car in the world going after them. And look, they make John Cena sacrifice himself to kind of save his nephew, even though he was safe in the car. Then he was on the car to try to help fix the cannon and then gets kidnapped instead of just being in the car, because they wouldn't have like killed his son because they need his son for whatever their dastardly kidnapped kid plan is, I guess. But it's emotional to see John Cena sacrifice himself. You know, like I said, he grew to be really fun in this movie from what his more stoic, not as fun character was in the last one. But look, you never really know. Is he dead? Will he come back from the dead? Will he be the first zombie? Will he be riding dinosaurs? Was it a Jurassic Park movie the whole time? You just never really know what's going to happen with this franchise and how many characters are actually dead. There's like 3 actually dead characters. And, you know, we didn't get shot in the head and dismembered, and even that might not stop someone in Fast and Furious. But what we do know is, what we for sure have is the first person who's seemingly in Dom's family. They have a little shootout on the bridge. The one guy makes it. I feel like Brie Larson died in the last bridge shootout thing. I don't know. So many things happen. There's too many characters to keep track in these movies. I say that about Avengers too, but it never felt as hard as it does these movies sometimes. But yeah, I mean, having Alan Ritchson be the betrayer of the family, like, and I like that it's not just out of the blue. Like, he's also shown in that Fast 5 flashback later on to be working with Momoa. And outside of that, like the Pete Davidson Tangent crew, they're all coming on like a plane or something. Maybe they're going to save someone, but then they get blown up. Maybe they're all dead. Doubt it, obviously. That'd be crazy. But like at the end of all this, Dom ends up at the bottom of a dam with his son, alive for now after driving down a breaking, blowing up dam and having as much plot armor as anyone has ever had. Everyone's alive for now, but, you know, or not. It's the Schrodinger's cat in the Fast and Furious franchise where we're left with who's dead, who's alive. We'll have to wait to find out if they make 1 or 2 or who knows how many more of these movies. But a lot of people came back from the dead in this franchise, and that's unbelievable, and so are some of the driving stunts. But the craziest, most unbelievable surprise has to be at the end. There was this whole just big off-screen feud between The Rock and Vin Diesel, and we've heard this whole thing about The Rock can't ever lose a fight, and just there was all these problems. And Vin Diesel been trying to get The Rock back, but I guess he's going to be back for the sequel after a post-credit scene. And maybe they're making him get a spin-off with someone too, but not going to be Jason Statham, which you'd say, well, why the heck wouldn't it? But this franchise is hard to keep track of. You need all the red strings and the push pins to kind of keep track of everything. No clue where all this is going or how many more movies will end up coming out before the checkered flag waves for the final time. But the cliffhanger ending had this cliffhanger ending had one fun, unique thing going for it. And it's all thanks to the fun that Momoa brings to this villain role. Like, no matter what you're looking forward to or, you know, what the eventual resolution will be of these movies, like, Momoa really brought it as a really fun, evil villain character. And I don't think he's ever really been a villain. I don't think that's not known for. I don't think Game of Thrones he was a villain. It's just, you know, this is a new angle for him, and I'm really excited to see where that goes, if nothing else, for this franchise. As before with these Spider-Verse movies, they're loaded with A-list actors and some franchise returners. Some are both returners and A-listers. Our titular lead is once again played by Shameik Moore, still as strong as ever. Outside of that, the main folks are pretty well-known vets or well up-and-comers. Brian Tyree Henry is once again finding another role to crush here. His comedic energy, it's on point, especially coming up after his Bullet Train role. He's Jeff Morales in this one. Haley Steinfeld has an expanded and more fleshed out role as Gwen Stacy. The franchise feels like after this movie it has something closer to 2 leads now, and all the rumors of the third one are making it seem like they both are going to get time to shine. Now look, be it Scrubs or Dexter, obviously Dexter for me, you'll recognize Luna Lauren Velez's voice as Rio Morales here. I was a never will be a new girl guy. Whole story, I had to write a script about it, didn't work well. I don't like sitcoms. It's just not for me. But I've enjoyed Jake Johnson a number of things, and as the most Peter Parker we get in this franchise, outside of maybe what Chris Pine did, we'll get to that. Like, he really does bring some wonderful things to the role and a nice different take on Spider-Man vulnerability. Some of the big name voices are cameos, but I have to say it was still cool and fun to see all the pop culture references, including archival beats from the first 2 live-action movie Spider-Mans with Garfield and Maguire. But more unique, it has to be Peggy Lou from the Venom franchise. That has to be the most unexpected, neat moment in all her live-action glory. Well, that and, of course, a yet unseen, in the full suit Prowler outfitted Donald Glover reprising his role, maybe, or just another universe version of Spider-Man Homecoming's character who we saw for a brief. A lot of threads, get it? Like Twitter, the new Twitter thing by Meta, Threads. A lot of threads left unpulled in the Spider-Man MCU movies, including whatever they do with Donald Glover, whatever they do with Scorpion's character, like things that we may or may never see, but it'll make you wonder if we ever do get some version of a Sinister Six, especially from what we saw. I doubt it, but just putting it out there. But you never really know with the multiverse variants if this is foreshadowing for Glover or just a nod to him being in that other movie. The last Spider-Man, played by Holland, did not get any time to shine on camera, be it archival footage or not, but at least he gets a shout out. Outside of that, you might have also recognized the voice of J.K. Simmons being a version of J. Jonah Jameson, the voice of J. Jonah Jameson, you would say, and 2 or 3 Lonely Island men get voice roles in this, the lucky men being Jorma Tesson and Andy Samberg. Other fun ones are just another version of Mahershala Ali's Prowler, another superhero role for Jack Quaid, and coming off Bodies, not another Pete Davidson movie role, but instead Amandel Stenberg joins in on the fun. The list goes on with some big ads, there's just so many you could put on, right? It's another big Oscar Isaac superhero role. He's kind of a villain in this one, but he's really been killing the big budget movies these days. He's Miguel O'Hara in this one. Jason Schwartzman as another semi to eventually a main villain. Black Panther. And I wish he'd come back to Black Panther, but I don't have time. But at least Daniel Kaluuya, who's definitely a main name actor after 2 really good, one I think is better than the other, Jordan Peele movies, those horror ones. But at least Daniel Kaluuya has a role to play here that also gives him time to shine in this franchise. And while his name may not be household, I do like Shea Wiggum. Pretty much after his long-standing role on Boardwalk Empire, I don't think he gets a lot of credit, but I think he's pretty good. Whether this is all right as rain, there was no Nicolas Cage speaking role in this movie. While that is all right as rain, there was no Nicolas Cage speaking role in this movie. Travesty. He's been around the news of late for his very fun Dead by Daylight or Dying by Daylight voice role. Look that up on TikTok. It's just him going off on some voice acting. He is an absolute treat. Obviously, we'll talk about the Flash movie in another episode, but hopefully he will be in the 3rd, most likely, end cap to this lovely trilogy. At least it seems like his character will be there, and if his character's there, you gotta think he'll have a voice role in the 3rd one. That's the last of all this talking stuff, so let's get to the plot finally. I didn't know what I needed or wanted from a sequel to Sony's animated Spider-Man masterpiece with these Miles Morales-focused movies, but I, of course, was cool with more. The last one really focused heavily on this lead and had a few other Spider variants messing around in his story, his universe, and his new-ish to new to him, I guess, they all existed, Rogues Gallery. We didn't meet a ton of Spider people, but we met enough. This movie decided to give us a bit more backstory on the other of the 2 most important members, I think you would say. Gwen Stacy's a little more vital to the story at times, it feels like, to the new girl acted Peter Parker. And we do get a lot more of Gwen Stacy and just a bit more of this other Peter Parker, who's not just another Spider-Man, but a Spider-Dad. So Gwen gets the backstory of how she became her universe's Spider-Person, which maybe more comic savant people have heard before. But with the MCU and now the DCEU swan song doing multiverses, there are so many other stories that get to be told. And original or not, seeing Peter Parker become the Lizard only to have Gwen kill him on accident and have her own father blame her alter ego for killing this guy that he also liked as just a normal person, not as a lizard. It's both classic Spider-Man and just a good heartbreaker. There was an emotional and powerful way to kick things off before seeing Miles again. And it has to be said, before that, holy hell, was that sound mixing horrid to start. That Gwen VO probably had some important stuff in there, but we'll as sure as shoot never know what was said in the first 3 minutes of this movie. The drum sound and mix was way, way too hot, heavy, and loud. Thankfully, it's only happened here once, but gosh dang was it bad. I had heard it was coming, but that was the easiest Where's Waldo to find the problem area I've ever played. I was like kind of wondering, oh, am I going to hear? Am I going to notice it? Are they crazy? But I could not tell what the heck she was saying in that first couple minutes of the movie over all those drum sounds. But outside of that, the creativity and animation styles here are once again super cool. Obviously, we met more spider people with the Oscar Isaac vampire Spider-Man leading an entire group of spider people things. Never forget the Peter parked car and the T-Rex one. Patakar. I think that's what it is. But starting off with a flying machine from Leonardo da Vinci inspired vulture. Super cool, especially for a fan of the Assassin's Creed games, especially the early ones with Ezio the Italian storyline. Bring more of those games to the Switch ASAP, like the newer-ish ones. I mean, but outside of me craving more Switch games, happy for the eventual Arkham City game to come out, preferably not on cloud gaming. Please, no more cloud gaming for Switch. I get it. You'd say get a better system, get a more powerful system, but come on now. But kind of to this, I gotta say, the animation styles are always different for different characters, and it felt like seeing 20 animation styles for different characters from different worlds would be jarring, but it just looks really different and cool. Keep that up, Spider-Verse. That stuff's super cool. But to this story, it was, as per usual, heartbreaking, as it was every Spider-Person, right? The parents figure has to make a choice about what to do when they're eventually discovering their kid is a Spider-Person. Sometimes, most times, they're coolish with it, but more often than not, that person dies shortly after, so it kind of didn't matter if they were cool with it. But seeing Gwen's dad not accept her while threatening to arrest her, tough emotional moment for sure. And this movie definitely has a lot of those emotional hits. The first one did too. Love to see it. But to the Miles story, it's a bit of a coming-of-age story next step. Kind of makes sense with the last movie of just, butting heads a bit with your parents over odds and ends. And, look, that always happens with all Spider people, especially with their parents. But, look, you're late to things, all the time. Classic example of Spider-Man 2's pizza time delivery thing. You're just always late. It's the worst thing of more quicksand, of the more you save the day, the more you're late for things in your personal life and engagements, and the repercussions make scheduling and timing harder, especially fighting crime. The usual problems that I'm sure every web slinger has to deal with. That and being lonely. Another Spider-Person thing in this case. Miles missing Gwen, but this movie takes that loneliness out of it a bit for most Spider people, with the whole group of them from all across the Spider-Verse, like the name of the movie. They're all together and having a good time, but the coming-of-age story just took a turn for just being more teen angsty at times, and that is okay, but not as good as the first one. Now, with all that comes the creation, well, they already have, but the introduction of the previously created but never seen the villain, The Spot. Can't say I'm familiar with this member of the Rogues Gallery. There are so many well-known Spider-Man villains, which I think, to their credit, you do know a lot of Spider-Man villains. And this just feels like another Polka Dot Man retread from DC in the recent Suicide Squad movie. I'll never know who comes first. I could Google it. I'm not going to do that. We'll just see what happens. Someone maybe tell me in the comments and let me know on TikTok or Instagram or Twitter who came first, chicken or the egg kind of thing. Now, not sure all of that stuff, but the quote of Jeff Morales, like there's like this villain monologue, the music's all music-y. The guy's talking about, you created me, I created you, all that stuff. And just the thing about Jeff Morales being like, why'd you create that guy? Like, it's so funny. And the comedic timing there, it cracks me up every time I see it on the TikTok feed. I'll look it up sometimes just because this thing is hilarious. I actually like the idea here of someone getting like a lame seeming power. It's also like impossible to hide it, so you can't like just have this power like, you know, Mystique, right? Or something like that where you can hide it, or Charles, I guess, is the big one, right? He looks like a normal enough guy, but he has crazy mutant powers, but he could be presenting and passing as someone who's not a mutant. All, like, this is such an X-Men movie thing. All X-Men properties, really. They discuss all the time. And this is like a villain by circumstance that through weird events, look, the hero actually made. And while he starts as what we think of as they even say it, villain of the week, you know, oh, this guy is like not a big deal. That's one of like the final straws to becoming this outlandish and aggressive villain that is somehow scarier than anything from the first movie. Yes, OG Prowler had some moments. Vampire Spider-Man, Miguel O'Hara has some moments, but not like this. Not like this. It's just so hard to not make that reference. When I hear not like this, you got to say it again, kind of somber. It's such a good Matrix. I love the first Matrix. I really, really love the first Matrix, and I can't help but keep making that line. Now, we don't really, in this movie, get to have the same cast of Spider people. I get it. That'd be too repetitive. You want to mix up, see other areas of the Spider-Verse, and eventually, hopefully, if everyone come together in a big kumbaya kind of Avengers-level moment. Now, the big ones here are Hobie Brown, Spider-Punk, and Pavitr Parabikar. No way I said that right, so I'll apologize for that. But that's the best I could do. Gotta love that they continued kind of this notion of like, oh, I'm the only Spider-Man. Here's my Spider-Person intro scene with the comic and the love interest and the tragic backstory. And like they're all slightly different, but I love how they're all just kind of similar. And that always gets me. It's a fun little trope that they're doing these that I enjoy. And I love all that. And look, Lego Spider-Man, the whole thing being animated by a kid, you got to give that a shout out. This is a cool way to show, just show off a different animation style and give creators a chance. It's such a cool thing. And I do love those Lego movies, and I know that this is not that, and I know those are probably at the end of their life, but what a moment we had with those two and the Batman one of those Lego movies. And I do love Legos. I'm a Lego kid, always was, and haven't Legoed in a while, but I do like those Lego video games now. And just kind of, I guess, we're going all over the place a little bit. I got distracted talking about Legos, but like going through these multiverses and showing the Spot kind of like he's going through his tough moment, you know, his big like confrontation did not go the way he said, and now he's kind of trying to learn about his powers and kind of this interesting thing about like kind of absorbing more power. And it's interesting to kind of take this guy who's a more minor inconvenience bad guy to, you know, trying to set off and, you know, absorb multiple explosion reactor things, become another problem for other people, and then become a problem for the whole multiverse. Just an interesting growth perspective for a character that we just met. And like these explosion things also brings up a very interesting angle these movies take of the canon events in Spider people's lives. All the time travel rules in all these different superhero movies and movies all over the place with multiverses and everything of the sort. And there are always going to be some big no-no rules. They all have different ones. This movie's can event things is to mess with one of these events that's supposed to happen no matter what you do, it just has to happen, will happen. If for some reason it doesn't happen, usually someone dying, it messes up the whole timeline and it will blow up and disappear. So many multiverse rules, so little time. And like that is how we end up meeting who could be considered a villain of the story, the latest Oscar Isaac super character. This one is Miguel O'Hara. Not a real villain, but a real problem for our main spider persons. Also unrelated, remember when Chris Pine, and I talked about it early, like I didn't remember that he was the Spider-Man who died in the first movie. I had to Google it, and they had this whole thing about, they want to make him the most complete, best Spider-Man that took inspiration from everyone, who was like the perfect one who died, and being a big tragedy and all that stuff. Like, just throwing it out there. Definitely didn't remember it was Chris Pine, and people gotta respect Chris Pine when they're doing their Chris ranking, because I feel like people are putting Chris Pine way at the bottom, 404, and I'm not going to give you everything. Chris Pine should not be at 4. That's crazy to me. But back to the movie, I guess, instead of just Chris Pine talk. Once we get to meet the big Spider Coalition, this is where we get all the fun cameos, like I said. Before that, we did get that Peggy Lou one from Venom, but here we get the Donald Glover as a live-action dressed Prowler, and this is also where we get all those archival footage clips of the Andrew Garfield, Tobey Maguire movies. I feel like it's weird that they didn't use Tom Holland in any way. The reference is good about him and that wizard, but like, I don't know, man. I felt like they could have included him. There was talk about including all three of them somehow in the first one to start, but it's just weird that they didn't include them here, especially when they clearly don't care about combining like animation styles is one thing, but having, like I said, the Lego one, having live action ones, like, I don't know about all that. The storyline is going to have some familiar elements here and there, trying to replace yourself in a happy universe. Multiverse of Madness did it too, but without a bad ice cream song in this movie. But here there's a hint of a redemption arc where Miguel gets to atone for that, where they just killed off Wanda in Multiverse of Madness, and seemingly that's the end, and it's weird that that's just the end. Now, having had, Miles' uncle's death already, you figure Spider-Man was done with deaths in his family. But between the notion of him not being a real Spider-Man and saying his dad will die, has to be a canon event, maybe he's a real Spider-Man, like maybe you can have multiple canon events and multiple deaths to shape you who you are. Miles has to fight off every other Spider-Man besides maybe his 2 movie friends here with Gwen and the Jake Johnson Spider-Man to get back and hopefully save his dad. And there's so many spider people and creatures and things, and it's crazy seeing all the different ones they put in. I definitely had the paper bag one in there. I think they had the Sony one in there. Like, so many spider peoples in these things. Now, things don't go according to plan, as you expect. With a 2-part movie, everyone's doing it. The things aren't just going to be resolved. It has to be, and I knew this going into it. Someone's either going to die, there's going to be a cliffhanger, or they could always do both. Look, Fast and Furious just did it. We just talked about it. This one was the latter of just a cliffhanger, though. And, like, there are some fun cliffhanger strands there. Gwen gets some closure from her dad getting sent back there. A good story, but not as much time was spent there throughout. More beginning and end capping things before she ends up with Miles' parents to tell them, kind of hopefully try to save them. But, this kind of leads to gathering the gang from the first and second movie. So we're hoping Nicolas Cage has a speaking role in the third one to hopefully save Miles, even though no one knows where the heck he is. Now, where is he? The whole thing is he got sent back to where his spider came from, not where he's from, and all that stuff. And it's another multiverse. One where his dad is dead, his Uncle Aaron is alive, and I think supposed to be the one who's married to his still mom. And he has a multiverse version of himself as a Prowler. And like the buildup was so good. If your hair looks different, and you're like, well, what do you mean it's different? And just the slight differences to the big things. Crazier things happen, and we're left wondering with what happens in the next entry, which is what you're supposed to do. It's always hard watching these movies because there's a second part. You could just have a long movie, but you can't have it that long. Most audiences aren't me, who can do a 4 hour, 6 hour, I'll take whatever. Still waiting for the 6 hour Andy Muschietti cut. I'm bringing that up too much, and really I'm not that invested in it, but there's other cuts, right? The Schumacher cut. I heard there could be even longer Lord of the Rings things. I'll take an extended cut there. There was the Revenge of the Sith thing. Air cut, I don't think that's longer. That's just different. Like, I can handle it. But, we're just going to have to wait and see when this next entry comes out. As these cliffhanger movies are always going to do. And we got that. We got another Fast X. So we got a lot of waiting to do to clear up some franchises. But before I get to that, music is important in this movie too. Not as much as some of the Guardians movies, I think. But I have to say, me personally, first Spider-Verse soundtrack better. And it is all like new songs. It's not like it's like just a bunch of oldies that whatever. It's like movie music that was kind of made around and for the movie, or at least close enough and picked out for it, whatever you want to call it. But like first Spider-Verse movie soundtrack, definitely for me better. So a lot happened in this movie, and I feel like the consensus is this one is better than the first one. Like overall, I don't think that's my take. It's another solid entry, but I missed the smaller, more personal storyline of the first one. And like Harry Potter, Hunger Games, and the recently watched by me all 5 Twilight movies, this movie, in my opinion on it, as a 2-part movie, will depend by a more defined legacy after seeing what the other part looks like. So, 3 movies up, 3 movies down, but it is that time of the show for some letterbox content and to rate these. We're not ranking them because they're all over the place in type and franchise, so you can't do that. But we're going to go first. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. It's a 4. It's an easy 4. It could have been a 4.5. I'm not saying it was the music's fault. It definitely wasn't the music's fault. I just felt like it was really good, really fun, really emotional, but there were just certain moments where you're like, I don't think it's a 4.5. Nothing's a 5 ever, but I don't think it's a 4.5. But it's really good. Guardians of the Galaxy, really good. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, it's interesting because I was really going to give it a 4. I think it's, to me, like I said, it's good, it's fun. There's so much going on. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's so close to being a 3.5 for me. I'm you know what? Call me crazy. I'm going to put it at a 3.5 right now. Still good out of 5. 3.5 still good. 7 out of 10 ain't bad. It just felt like I think the other one I really, really liked. And this was good. Just didn't do it as much for me, even though it was really good. Had a lot of cool animations. I think that could easily change once we see what the part 2 looks like. Fast X, it's the epitome of a 3-star movie. It's fine. It's fun. You can watch it. You could watch it again. And let's be real, if you're watching it again, it's for Jason Momoa. Things happen. Some dumb things happen. You're watching Fast X because of Jason Momoa. And that's okay. So, that's all the time we have for this episode, even though it was a lot of time. Fast X, like I said, totally fine. You know what you get with one of those movies, and they've all been fine and fun. Maybe not Tokyo Drift, but there's moments, probably, I'm sure. It's like Expendables with cars. This is no exception. But man, what a way to wrap up the Guardians franchise and also have a certified smash hit in phase, is it 5? Is it 6? Golly, now I gotta look up if it's 5 or 6. But man, what a way to wrap up the Guardians franchise and also have a certified smash hit in phase 5. But man, what a way to wrap up the Guardians franchise and have a certified smash hit in phase 5 that it's been needing for the MCU. Super important following the less than stellar first movie of the bunch with Ant-Man 3. But let us not wallow or linger in those bad vibes. Lastly, another fine entry in the Spider-Man movies for Sony. It's nice to know they can actually make some okay Spider-Man Sony movies. These animated movies have been strong, and gosh, I hope they could stick the landing in 2024. All 3 of these movies were in it. Either fun or good and fun. What do you think of these franchises? Has the Guardians franchise been doing some good things overall for you? And Has the Guardians franchise been doing some good things overall for you? And what have you thought of the trajectory of the Fast and Furious franchise? And if you have to pick a favorite, which Spider-Verse movie has the lead for you so far? Let me know on social media at Nick Nack Movies and @NickNack_IC. Hit me up on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Letterboxd. We're not on Threads yet. We'll see. But definitely as a movie guy, Letterboxd. Can't wait to see you there, so cheers, and as always, until next time, cinephiles.
Are you not entertained?
I think this is going to be the beginning of a beautiful friendship. I don't like goodbyes. Let's just call this see you later, alligator.